Imagine a landscape where the ground itself seems to mourn the earth, covered in endless rows of lifeless bodies, their faces frozen in expressions of agony. Clouds of flies hover above, forming dark halos over the carnage. The stench of decaying flesh hangs so heavy in the air that even the bravest soldiers feel it claw at their throats, threatening to suffocate them. Among these horrors, gaunt survivors stagger like ghosts, their bodies reduced to skin and bone, their eyes hollow with trauma. These were the first unbearable sights that greeted Allied soldiers as they began to tear open the gates of the concentration camps scattered across Germany. The months and years of unchecked cruelty left deep scars, not only on the prisoners, but also on the liberators whose lives would never be the same after what they witnessed. It is no wonder that even hardened soldiers, seasoned by the savagery of global conflict, could not control the flood of emotions when faced with such depravity. The camps were drenched, literally and figuratively, in the blood of innocents. And as the war drew to a close, an unexpected reversal occurred. Those who had once wielded power within those barbed wire fences now faced the wrath of their former victims and sometimes the swift judgment of Allied troops. Retribution was inevitable, and for many, it felt like a justice long overdue. Today, we take you inside those infamous moments, into the heart of the camps, into the minds of the liberators, and into the shadows of revenge that followed. What did the Allies see? How did they react in the face of such monstrous cruelty? The answers are both haunting and unforgettable. By mid-1944, the downfall of Nazi Germany was all but certain. The Soviet Red Army, having paid for every inch of ground with blood, was racing toward Berlin, annihilating any Nazi resistance in its path. On the Western Front, the Allied forces had stormed the beaches of Normandy and were now closing in on the heart of Hitler's Reich. The Nazi regime, sensing its impending collapse, grew desperate. Heinrich Himmler, the architect behind the concentration camps, ordered his men to erase all evidence of the final solution, the systematic extermination of millions. But some crimes could not be buried so easily. The Allies had heard stories, whispers of atrocities, rumors of mass graves, but nothing could prepare them for the reality. When they finally broke through and entered territory the Nazis once controlled, what they discovered was beyond their darkest imaginations. The first true confrontation with this horror came on July 22, 1944, when Soviet troops liberated the Majdanek concentration camp near Lublin, Poland. Originally built as a forced labor camp for the local Jewish population, Majdanek had quickly become a machine of death. 7 gas chambers operated day and night, murdering men, women, and children with ruthless efficiency. In their haste to flee the advancing Soviets, the Nazis failed to destroy the evidence, leaving the camp eerily intact. For the first time, the world saw the full magnitude of Nazi brutality with its own eyes. As the Soviet soldiers moved through the gates of Majdanek, they were met by a scene straight out of a nightmare. Piles of bodies, men, women, children lay abandoned, their lives snuffed out by gas, bullets, starvation. The air was thick with death, buzzing with flies, heavy with an odor that would haunt the soldiers for years to come. Skeletal figures stumbled through the ruins, their faces so expressionless they seemed already halfway gone. This was the Allies' initiation into the unspeakable reality of the Holocaust. Though rumors had circulated for years, nothing could have prepared even the most battle-hardened for the scale and cold efficiency of the crimes revealed in these camps. In Majdanek alone, over 880,000 innocents had perished. The evidence was everywhere: mountains of shoes, suitcases, and even shorn human hair-chilling trophies of the Nazi obsession with erasing their victims' identities. Majdanek was only the beginning. As the Allies pressed deeper into Nazi-occupied Europe, each liberated camp revealed new layers of horror. Auschwitz, the very name a synonym for evil, was next. By January 1945, the Nazis were desperate to cover their tracks. They forced tens of thousands of prisoners on brutal death march westward, leaving the weakest behind to die. When the Soviets finally arrived at Auschwitz, what they found defied belief. Warehouses, packed with human belongings, more than 7,000 kilograms of human hair, and the skeletal remains of those too frail to be evacuated. Even the most stoic soldiers broke down. Some wept openly, shaken to the core. Others stared in silence, unable to process the scale of human suffering they now stood witness to. Many were tormented by a single question: how could humanity sink so low? Few survivors celebrated their freedom right away. For many, the sudden appearance of new soldiers felt like another Nazi trick, a cruel prelude to more suffering. Some could not even stand, so weak from starvation and disease that they barely registered the change in their circumstances. It was only when they were taken to field hospitals and offered food, warmth, and gentle voices that the reality of liberation began to sink in. For the first time in years, they dared to hope. Yet, hope was fragile. Of the 1.3 million people sent to Auschwitz, only about 7,000 remained alive when the Red Army arrived. The rest had vanished into the gas chambers, the crematoria, the endless mass graves. News of these horrors traveled quickly. The Soviet reports sent to the Western Allies were chilling, but even the most graphic descriptions could not capture the visceral impact of what American and British soldiers would find when they reached the camps themselves. By April 1945, Allied forces poured into German territory, driving the Nazis back toward Berlin. With each step forward, they uncovered more camps, each one a fresh wound open to the world. The liberators braced themselves for what they would find, but nothing could shield them from the reality that awaited. April 1945. American and British soldiers, young and old, crossed deeper into German soil, their hearts heavy with rumors of Nazi cruelty, but nothing could have prepared them for what they found as they approached the gates of camps like Buchenwald and Dachau. The air itself seemed to shudder with dread. Before even glimpsing the prisoners, the liberators were assaulted by an unbearable stench, the rot of countless corpses left in the open, the product of years of neglect, starvation, and systematic murder. Inside, the scene was even more ghastly. Prisoners, wasted to the point of resembling walking skeletons, huddled together in filthy bunks barely wide enough to lie in. Their hollow eyes told stories of suffering that words could never capture. Disease ran rampant. Typhus, tuberculosis, and infection spread unchecked, claiming lives even after liberation. Some soldiers, unable to withstand the horror, vomited or wept openly. Others walked in numb silence, haunted by the sheer weight of the atrocities. The Nazi guards, sensing the end, often attempted to destroy evidence of their crimes. At Dachau, SS men scrambled to burn documents and corpses, but the Allied advance was too swift. When the Americans stormed the camp, they discovered 39 railway wagons filled with naked corpses, bodies so emaciated their bones seemed to pierce their skin. About 2,000 dead, some still warm, bore witness to murders committed mere hours before liberation. For the Allied troops, the horror demanded justice. The chaos of liberation sometimes turned to retribution. Eyewitness accounts diverge, but a single truth remains. Vengeance was swift and brutal. At Dachau, after the SS surrendered, a group of German guards was rounded up by American troops. Some sources claim the guards tried to run, prompting a hail of gunfire. Others describe a summary execution revenge for the years of torture and death. Between 35 and 50 SS men were killed within the camp walls. The snow ran red, a grim echo of the suffering inflicted on so many. Yet, even as justice was meted out, it brought little comfort. Soldiers admitted to feeling a dark satisfaction revenge for the innocent, but also a profound act of retribution could erase what had happened within those fences. Dachau's bloody liberation became infamous, but it was not the only place where chaos reigned. Mauthausen in Austria, one of the most notorious camps, was reached just days after Hitler's death. There, the prisoners, many driven to madness by years of brutality, turned on their tormentors. Guards and collaborators known as capos, who had enforced Nazi rule, were hunted down, beaten, and even beheaded in frenzied acts of vengeance. Heads were placed on stakes, an eruption of rage after years of powerlessness. American soldiers, overwhelmed by the sights and the cries for justice, often did nothing to intervene. In their eyes, the perpetrators were only meeting the fate they had so cruelly dealt to others. May 1945. As the guns finally fell silent across Europe, the last remaining concentration camps faced their reckoning. Germany's unconditional surrender marked the official end of the war, yet inside these camps, the suffering was far from over. Even as the guards quietly surrendered and opened the gates, the consequences of years of torture, malnutrition, and disease continued to claim lives. For thousands of survivors, freedom came too late. Their bodies broken by deprivation and haunted by unthinkable memories simply could not recover. Some survivors, unable to comprehend the cruelty they had endured, chose to end their own lives. The trauma was too deep, the darkness too overwhelming. The war had ended, but for many, the nightmare persisted and would follow them for the rest of their days. The toll was not limited to the victims. Even Allied soldiers, hardened by battle, found themselves forever changed by what they had seen. Some could not sleep, tormented by the memories of skeletal faces and silent suffering. There were those who, unable to cope with the horror, also took their own lives. The legacy of the camps was a scar that would never fully heal, a shadow that lingered long after the liberation. The aftermath brought its own form of reckoning. German guards and camp officials, once drunk with power, were now prisoners themselves. Many were tried for their crimes. Some, like Rudolf Hess of Auschwitz and Martin Weiss of Dachau, were sentenced to death. Yet for countless others, justice was fleeting. Most of the lower-ranking guards faced only a few years in prison if they were prosecuted at all. Many faded quietly into post-war Europe, living out their days burdened by guilt and memories that refused to fade. But the anguish of the perpetrators could never compare to that of the survivors. Those who endured the camps carried with them memories of one of the darkest chapters in human history, a burden that generations would struggle to understand. The world was forced to confront questions with no easy answers. Did the deaths of the guards bring any comfort to the lost souls whose loved ones never returned? The lines between justice and revenge blurred in the blood-soaked snow of the liberated camps. As night fell over the ruins, Allied soldiers sat in silence, unable to eat or sleep. Grown men wept openly, the images of death and suffering replaying in their minds. For one night and for many nights after, there was no comfort to be found. In the end, the true horror of the camps was not just in the bodies or the ruins, but in the wounds that would never heal. The survivors, forever marked by the cruelty they endured, became living testaments to the danger of unchecked hatred and the need to remember, so that such darkness might never return.